Think about the last time you walked into a salary negotiation fully prepared. You'd done the research, you knew the market range, you had your number, and then, before you said a single word, the HR rep opened with, "So, the budget for this role is around $119,000. That moment, right there, that's where the negotiation ended, before it began. Not because you weren't qualified, not because your research was wrong, not because you failed to push back hard enough, but because a number landed in your brain, and from that second forward, every counter, every calculation, every sense of what was reasonable orbited that number like planets locked around a star. This is called anchoring, and it is one of the most studied, most replicated, most financially costly cognitive biases in behavioral economics. Let's look under the hood of this impulse. Meet James, 38 years old, 12 years in enterprise sales. He's been at the same company since he was 26, and he finally lands an interview at a firm that could change everything. Better title, better scope, real equity on the table. The HR call goes well. The conversation flows naturally. The recruiter seems engaged, and James feels like he's building real momentum. Then, near the end, the recruiter says, almost as an aside, "Our budget for this role is around $119,000. James knows the market. He did the homework. He spent 3 evenings cross-referencing salary databases, LinkedIn data, and 2 conversations with peers at comparable firms. The range for this position, this city, this seniority level, it runs from $130,000 to $145,000. He knows this, and yet, when the offer comes in at $122,000, he negotiates, gets to $124,000, feels, briefly, like he won something. He didn't win. He left $20,000 on the table every year, for however long he stays in that role. Compound that across a typical tenure of 3 to 4 years, and the cost of that one unrecognized moment is somewhere between $60,000 and $80,000. Not because James lacked information, not because he lacked resolve, because a number arrived before his number did. And here is what matters. James is not naive. James is not uninformed. James is not weak at negotiation. James's brain ran the exact program it was built to run, and nobody told him that program had a vulnerability. That's what this video is about. Anchoring bias is what researchers describe as the tendency of the human brain to rely disproportionately on the first piece of numerical information it receives, and to use that number as the reference point for every judgment that follows. The word first is doing all the work in that sentence. Not the most accurate number, not the most relevant number, not the number closest to objective reality. The first number, that's the only qualification it needs. In a landmark series of experiments, Kahneman and Tversky demonstrated that even a completely arbitrary number, a number spun on a wheel, a number with zero logical connection to the question, would predictably and measurably shift people's estimates. Participants were asked to guess the percentage of African countries in the United Nations. Before answering, a spinning wheel visibly landed on either 10 or 65. People who saw 65 guessed significantly higher than those who saw 10. The wheel was rigged. The number was meaningless. And yet, the anchor held. What makes this finding so important isn't just the effect itself, it's how durable it is. Participants who were explicitly warned about anchoring bias before the experiment still showed the effect. Participants who were offered cash incentives for accuracy still showed the effect. Knowledge of the mechanism, motivation to overcome it, awareness of the trap, none of these reliably neutralized the anchor. Now think about what happens when the number isn't arbitrary, when it's delivered by a professional, in a formal context, attached to a role you actually want, spoken with calm institutional confidence. The anchor doesn't just nudge your thinking, it becomes the gravitational center of the entire conversation. Behavioral researchers estimate that anchoring influences the vast majority of salary negotiations globally, across industries, across experience levels, across cultures and compensation structures. This is not a junior employee problem. Senior professionals, experienced negotiators, people who know exactly what anchoring is, they fall for it at nearly the same rate. Your brain didn't fail you. It did precisely what it was designed to do. The question is, what was it designed for? And does that design still make sense in this room? Let's go back. Not 12 years, not 50, about 10,000 years. Your ancestors didn't negotiate annual compensation packages. They negotiated survival through trade, through exchange, through barter in small communities where the stakes of every transaction were immediate and physical. In that environment, the first offer you received was genuinely signal-rich. If another member of your group offered you 3 animal hides for your surplus grain, that number told you something real, something about scarcity, about what they valued, about what the exchange rate looked like in that specific moment. The first number wasn't a psychological trap, it was market data. It was information delivered by someone embedded in the same community, the same resource pool, the same immediate reality. And more than that, the cognitive bandwidth required to calculate an independent fair value from scratch every single time for every single exchange would have been expensive and inefficient. It was far more adaptive to use the first number as a baseline and adjust from there. Use the anchor, conserve the energy, move on to the next decision. The brain that anchors fast is a brain that conserves resources. And in an ancestral environment where cognitive load competed with decisions about food, shelter, and immediate physical threat, that conservation was intelligence. The ability to reach a good enough answer quickly using available reference points was a survival advantage. Slow deliberation could cost you. Fast anchoring kept you alive. There's another layer to this. In small, stable communities, the person making the first offer was someone you knew, someone whose incentives were at least partially aligned with yours, someone who would still be your neighbor, your trading partner, your collaborator the following season. The first number arrived in a context of ongoing relationship, mutual accountability, and shared consequence. The person on the other end of your salary negotiation call has none of those properties. They are optimizing for a budget you cannot see, within a system you are not part of, using strategies you were never taught to recognize. Here is what changed. The modern labor market is not a hunter-gatherer exchange. It is a negotiation environment that has been professionally designed, studied, and optimized by HR departments, compensation consultants, and recruiters trained specifically in behavioral influence. They didn't stumble onto anchoring accidentally. The research on anchoring in negotiation has been published, operationalized, and taught in business schools for decades. A study by Northcraft and Neal, working with practicing real estate agents, showed that agents given a property with an inflated listing price in their briefing materials would appraise that same property significantly higher than agents given a deflated price, even when the agents believed they were making independent professional judgments. These were not rookies. These were experienced professionals, and the planted number still moved them. The strategy of opening with a budget figure in salary negotiations isn't neutral small talk. It is architecture. The recruiter who says, "The budget for this role is around X," before you have stated your expectations, is not sharing information generously. They are setting the gravitational field for every number that follows in the conversation. Your brain receives that first number, and without conscious awareness, without any deliberate choice on your part, it begins recalibrating everything around it. Your internal sense of what's reasonable shifts toward that figure. Your counteroffer narrows. Your satisfaction with the final outcome is quietly inflated because you moved upward from the anchor, even if you remain well below the actual market ceiling. Dan Ariely and his colleagues at MIT ran a particularly striking set of experiments on this exact mechanism. Participants were asked to write down the last 2 digits of their social security number before placing bids on consumer products: wine, chocolates, computer equipment. Those with high last 2 digits consistently bid higher. Those with low numbers bid lower. The products didn't change. The participants didn't change. Only the irrelevant number they wrote down first, a number belonging to an entirely different system, shifted the outcome. Now apply that to a room where a professional is placing a number on your professional value. The anchor in salary negotiation is not random. It is selected. It is delivered at a psychologically optimal moment, when you are engaged, slightly nervous, and haven't yet established your own reference point. The number is designed to land before you have anything to push back against. This is not a conspiracy. It is applied behavioral science. and your brain cooperates fully because it was never built to resist it. This isn't a character flaw. This is the most replicated mechanism in behavioral economics. It runs in virtually every human brain, at every level of experience, every time a first number lands. Your brain ran the program it was built to run. The problem is, the program was written for a world that no longer exists. It isn't only salary negotiations. Consider Elena, 8 years of experience as a freelance UX designer, a strong portfolio, multiple clients paying her rate. A funded startup reaches out. Real scope, real timeline, real money available. Early in the first call, the founder mentions, almost in passing, "We've been working with contractors in the 2,000 range per month for this kind of work." Elena's rate is 4,000. She has clients there. She knows it's justified. But that number, 2,000, lands. It lands quietly. No alarm, no resistance, no moment where Elena consciously registers that an anchor has been set. Just a figure, arriving in a casual tone, in the middle of a conversation that feels collaborative and warm. And when she sends her proposal 3 days later, she sends 3,500. She tells herself she's pricing at a premium. She feels good about it. Maybe she gets the project. But here's what she doesn't see. She didn't lose 2,000 in that one conversation. She started a pattern. She anchored herself to that client's framing. And in every subsequent conversation with this client, scope expansions, renewals, referrals, the reference point is below her actual market rate. Compound that across 12 months, across 3 or 4 clients where a similar dynamic played out in the first call. The cost isn't a single project under price. It is a structural suppression of her earning trajectory, built on anchors she didn't choose and didn't recognize. Anchoring doesn't just cost you in the moment. It distorts the baseline you negotiate from for months afterward. I'm not telling you what to negotiate for. I'm showing you what's running under the hood when that first number lands. Here is what changes when you understand the mechanism. The anchor only works when it arrives uncontested. When there is no competing number already established in the room, the first number becomes the reference point by default. Because the brain has nothing else to calibrate against, it grabs the nearest available figure and builds outward from there. So the neutralization tool is this. Set your anchor before theirs lands. Behavioral economists call this the first mover advantage in reference framing. And it has nothing to do with aggression, nothing to do with opening so high that you break the conversation. It is about preloading the negotiation and your own brain with a specific, research-grounded number before any other number enters the space. Here is the protocol. Before any negotiation conversation, any call, any interview, any client meeting where compensation is likely to come up, you do one thing. You write down your number. Not a range. A single specific figure, grounded in actual market data. The going rate for your role, your location, your experience level, the scope of what's being asked. You write it down. You say it out loud. You make it concrete and personal before you pick up the phone. Why write it down? Because research on self-generated anchors shows that numbers you actively articulate yourself carry significantly more psychological weight than numbers you receive passively. A number you write and speak is stickier than a number someone else drops into the conversation. You are preloading your own reference frame so that when their number arrives, your brain has something to hold on to, a competing gravitational center that you place there deliberately, in a neutral state before the pressure of the room. And if their number lands first, which it often will, your response is not to counter immediately. Your response is to pause, name your anchor explicitly, and reframe the conversation. Not, well, I was hoping for a bit more than that. Not, my range is more in the 130 to 140 area. But, I appreciate you sharing that. Based on the scope of this role and my background, I'm working with a number of 143,000. Can we build from there? You are not arguing with their anchor. You are replacing it. You are introducing a competing gravitational center and inviting the conversation to reorganize around it. This is not a power play. This is a cognitive reset, using the same mechanism that was used on you, but this time in service of accurate market valuation rather than institutional cost savings. Your situation has variables I can't see from here. The biology is universal. The decision is yours. Now, the critical mistake that undoes this entire tool. People understand the principle. Set your anchor first, make it specific, and then they hedge. I'm looking for somewhere in the range of, or ideally I'd want around, or I was thinking something like. The vague anchor is almost as ineffective as no anchor at all. Research on numerical precision in negotiations from Columbia Business School found that precise anchors, not round numbers, not ranges, produced meaningfully better outcomes for the person who set them. The effect was consistent across different negotiation contexts and replicated across cultures. There's a clear psychological reason for this. A precise number signals that you arrived at it through deliberate calculation, not guesswork, not a feeling, research. The precision implies that behind this number is a process, a comparison of real data points, a considered judgment about your specific value in this specific context. It communicates confidence without confrontation. It gives the other party a specific reference point, rather than a range they can interpret toward whichever end benefits them. Round numbers feel like estimates. Precise numbers feel like conclusions. Not around 140. Not somewhere between 130 and 150. 143,000. The precision is the signal. The signal changes the room. And the room is where the money actually gets decided. Back to James. Same call. Same recruiter. The same words. Our budget for this role is around 119,000. But now James recognizes what just happened. He hears that number not as information, but as an anchor, a reference point someone just planted, deliberately, before he had a chance to establish his own. He pauses. A beat. 2 beats. Long enough for the instinct to subside and the recognition to settle in. Then he says, I appreciate you sharing that context. Based on what I've researched for this role and what I bring to it, I'm working with a number of 143,000. Can we work from there? The negotiation isn't over. It may be a long conversation. There may be pushback, recalibration, counteroffers, but the gravitational center has shifted. The room is now organized around a different number, his number, grounded in real data, delivered with precision and calm. And here's what James notices in the silence after he says it. The recruiter doesn't hang up. They don't end the process. They pause, recalibrate, and continue. Because a well-researched, precisely stated anchor delivered with composure is not an ultimatum. It is the opening of a real negotiation, one that James is now actually participating in, rather than reacting to. James isn't a different person in this version. He has the same experience, the same qualifications, the same leverage he had 5 minutes ago. What changed is that he stopped letting someone else write the first line of the equation. That's the update. Not a personality shift, not an intensive negotiation course, not becoming someone who bulldozes their way through compensation conversations. Just a single behavioral intervention, a number you prepared in advance, the recognition of what's happening when you hear theirs, and the deliberate choice to introduce your reference point before you lose the room. Your brain still wants to anchor. That instinct isn't going anywhere. 10,000 years of adaptive efficiency doesn't dissolve in a 20-minute phone call. But now you know where the vulnerability lives. You know which moment is the moment. And you know exactly what to do in it. The first number wins, always. Make sure it's yours. The glitch is real. So is the update. Now you know what's running. The question is, what do you do with that?